Government orders of the day, number 1 to number 4.
Marine Legislation Bill, Committee Stage. Copyright Parallel Importing of Films Amendment Bill, Committee Stage. Local Government Auckland Council Amendment Bill number 2, Committee Stage. Arts Council of New Zealand Toi Aotearoa Bill, Committee Stage.
I declare the House in committee for consideration of the Marine Legislation Bill, the Copyright Parallel Importing of Films Amendment Bill, the Local Government Auckland Council Amendment Bill number 2 and the Arts Council of New Zealand Toi Aotearoa Bill. Mr Chairman.
Mr Speaker.
Mr Chairman.
Good afternoon, honourable members. Kia ora tātou, no reira te whare, inga iwi, inga rio, inga hawewa, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Mrs King and Tihei Mōri ora. That's got you going. Right, honourable members, the House is in committee on the Marine Legislation Bill, the Copyright Parallel Importing of Films Amendment Bill, the Local Government Auckland Council Amendment Bill number 2, and the Arts Council of New Zealand Bill, Toi Aotearoa Bill. We come first to the Marine Legislation Bill, and the question is that Part 1 stand part is to debate on clauses 3 through to 87, include Schedules 1 and 2. I invite some honourable member to take the call. The honourable member, Darian Fenton.
Thank you so much, Mr Chairperson. I really appreciate the call. Thank you very much. And here we are, debating the committee stages of the Marine Legislation Bill, a bill that has taken the government so long, a bill that should have been passed more than 3 years ago, a bill that if it had been in place, we would not now have taxpayers picking up the burden of the disgraceful Rena tragedy. But even then, look, we were ready to go with this, Mr Chair. Way back in 2008, now, who was in government then? Oh, it was the Labour government. It was the Labour government. And what they had done was a national interest analysis relating to intervention on the high seas in cases of pollution by substances other than oil, known as the Intervention Protocol. And they had done the national interest analysis on the basis that the Labour government wished to introduce legislation to have that convention in New Zealand law. That was back in 2008. Then we had the Rena crisis, and of course we know that that has cost this country millions and millions of dollars more, $11.3 million of clean-up costs and for the Crown, and over $50 million due to this government's failure, this sloppy government, this hopeless government's failure to ratify the international conventions when all the work had already been done. All the work was in place. The select committee that I was a part of, that David Bennett was a part of, that Kate Wilkinson was a part of, had already done the work on this. It was ready to go. And finally, the government got around to doing something about it last year. That's more than a year after the Rena disaster. It was referred to the committee on the 11th of September after its first reading. It was all a big rush then, and we supported the bill because we knew that we had to do something urgently because this government had completely failed to do so. And so we had an urgent period of hearing submissions. The submission period was just 4 weeks. 4 weeks to enable people to make submissions on what then became quite a substantive bill, not only dealing with the conventions, but dealing with a whole range of other issues in the Marine Legislation Bill. and we heard 21 submissions. It was referred back, rushed through, you know, that great committee. All the Labor members on the Transport Industrial Relations Select Committee cooperated so we could get this bill back into the House, and it finally got round 6 months later, 6 months after it was referred back from the Select Committee, to having its second reading. Now, what was the date of that? That was the 20th of March 2013. So, you know, it's just dragged on and on. And it's interesting, one of the things that's been changed in the commencement date, Mr Chair, is the commencement date, because it was supposed to start on the 13th of April. It's supposed to start on the 13th of April. Now, what's the date today? Well, it was this year. But what's the date today? Now, it's nearly October, isn't it? 24th of September, so nearly 6 months later, here we are in the committee stages of the House debating this bill, which should have been done by the government, by the national government, when it became the government in 2009. So we struggle to understand, Mr Chair, why it has taken the government so long. It is an utter shambles. It shows how hopeless this government is in prioritising things that matter. And we, as I said, this is all in place, ready to go in 2008. And it's cost us money. It's cost us money. And the purpose of the legislation is so we won't have to pick up the tab. We won't have to leave taxpayers for polluters in the future. But with the arena, of course, already sunk, being ripped apart, it is just too late. Now, there's quite a lot of things in Part 1 that bear consideration, Mr Chair, and I want to start, Mr Chair.
The Honourable Member, Darian Fenton.
I wanted to start with Part 4A, Clause 40A and onwards, regulation of alcohol consumptions by seafarers. I'm very sorry, Mr Lees-Galloway, but I'm sure you can talk just as eloquently as I can, and I mean there's plenty more in Part 1 for us to dwell on. But this is a very interesting part, Mr Chair, because what it does is regulate alcohol consumption by seafarers, which is fine, and we support that, and there's a very, very long part in this bill, clause after clause, page after page, about regulating alcohol consumption by seafarers. But the interesting thing for us, and the thing that has this side of the House fascinated, is we can pass this legislation, albeit somewhat belatedly, but we can pass legislation that has regulation of alcohol consumption by seafarers, but we cannot pass regulation or legislation that regulates alcohol consumption of drivers, of motor drivers. They mucked around with that as well, because that, some time ago again, this was discussed, the issue of reducing the alcohol content, blood alcohol content, was brought to the Transport and Industrial Relations Select Committee. It was discussed there. It's some time now, I believe it's something like 3 years, since the government told us that they needed to do research, that they couldn't change, they couldn't reduce the blood alcohol level because they needed to do research on it. And we were told then it would take 2 years. Now, where is the research? Where's the research, Minister? No answer. Don't know. Interesting. Oh, there is none. They've kept it to touch. They're not bothering with that. But here they can, in this legislation, regulate in a very, very comprehensive way the proportion of alcohol in a seafarer's breath, have evidential breath tests, and make sure it doesn't exceed 250 micrograms of alcohol per litre of breath. Now, I know that my colleague Ian Lees-Galloway will have a lot to say about this, because I believe that he took over a members' bill on this very issue in relation to people driving on our roads, and it's still It's still in the ballot, still waiting for the government to wake up and realise that this is a very, very easy thing for them to do. It would save lives on the road if they supported Ian Lees-Galloway's members' bill to reduce the blood alcohol limit for motor drivers, for people driving cars. So the other thing, as I said, there's a lot in this part, Mr Chair, and I know that you'll be very indulgent in allowing us to pursue this. I just wanted to touch on one issue that was of great interest to the Select Committee, who heard from regional councils, and that was the issue of harbour masters. Now, harbour masters may be appointed by a regional council, but harbour masters are very hard to find. They have a very, very highly skilled job. And the powers in this bill, under clause 33F, Mr Chair, are extensive. And so they have to be highly qualified. They have to be highly qualified to be able to enter and remain on any ship and waters, to enter and remain on any maritime facility or on any land or property of a port company or port operator, to give directions about the time and manner in which ships may enter into, depart from, lie in or navigate waters within the region, the position, mooring, unmooring, placing, removing, securing or unsecuring of ships, the manner in which ships may take in or discharge cargo, the manner in which cargo is secured or handled on a ship if there is a risk of cargo falling overboard, direct the master of a ship to weigh anchor, to moor, unmoor, anchor, secure, unsecure, place or move the ship, cause a ship to be moored, unmoored, anchored or secured, cause any floating, submerged or stranding object that the harbour master considers to be a hazard, and on it goes, including requiring any person appearing to be in charge of a ship or seaplane, so you know, they've got authority over seaplanes, to stop and to give his or her name and address. And so they have extensive powers, and I'm hoping that I'll get quite a lot more time to talk about that.
I call the Honourable Member Moana Maki.